Good afternoon and hello, everyone. My name is Rich Longo, and I'll be your host. Thank you for joining us for another Flycast Partners webinar. Today's webinar is one we haven't held in quite some time, so I'm sure a lot of you are sitting on pins and needles awaiting to learn something new or even to learn about a product that you're not familiar with. Today's webinar is on BMC Client Management Tips and Tricks, presented by none other than Flycast Partners' own Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton's been with Flycast Partners for a number of years now and is an experienced pre-sales senior solutions consultant with extensive experience in collaborating with clients on IT strategies. He has been in the IT industry for well over 20 years. I'm sure he hates hearing that because I'm sure he's feeling his age, and has experience with a variety of IT tools and publishers, ranging from ITSM to ITM to ITOM. With this experience of multiple types and multiple positions within the industry, it allows him to have the bigger picture in mind when helping organizations or companies with their IT needs. He's able to answer most questions about just about any facet of those three verticals. Before we get started, Kyle, let me introduce our organization. Flycast Partners is here to deliver a seriously amazing IT experience. We were founded and staffed by personnel that have many years of experience in IT space and took the best ideas from the collective experiences, added the best components necessary to grow and become a leading value-added reseller in the North American IT market. Yes, all of Canada and the United States. We offer best-in-class implementation services and training and IT service management, IT asset management, IT operations management, enterprise service management, and workload automation spaces, all using ITIL best practice. Our professional services team can easily scale up or down to meet the IT needs of any customer, regardless of your size, complexity, or budgetary restrictions. We offer implementation services both on-site and remote, as well as training to reinforce your company's long-term IT success. Our ongoing remote administration and support service offerings, especially with BCM, will enable your organization to focus on your normal day-to-day operations, saving you both precious time and money. I encourage you to reach out to us directly at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278, or visit our website, folks, and chat with one of our folks on our chat box. We have IT specialists monitoring that box Monday through Friday during normal business hours. This is just one of many weekly webinars that we offer here at Flycast Partners, and I encourage you to go to our webinars page and check out any upcoming events that may interest you or any of your team members. I encourage you to check out white papers or data sheets or new tools or process help that you or your organization may need. Now, with that being said, should you have any questions today, I encourage you to please type those questions in the Q&A section of this presentation, and Kyle will answer as many of these questions as possible with the time allocated. With the questions, please make sure that you put them in there as they come up, and if they do come in a timely fashion, I'll be able to ask them when they're most relevant. I'll interrupt Kyle and try to ask your questions then. Kyle is going to be showing an overview, basically, of the tool, and Kyle, I'm turning this over to you right now. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Rich. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, but you're a little muffled for some reason. And I see your screen great, but your volume's a little muffled.
Is that any better?
No, it sounds like you're in a distance somewhere.
Well, let's see what we can do about that.
All right. And while that's happening, okay. All right. While that's happening, folks, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type those in the Q&A section of this webinar. Are you still there, Kyle?
I am. Can you hear me any better now?
All right, let's go ahead and go with it. I think we got it.
Okay, great. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. To start, for those that may not be familiar or as familiar as some others on the call with BMC's Client Management, this current slide I've got up just shows you an overall capability list. These are essentially the 5 main components of BMC Client Management. that you can license. And everything, of course, starts with discovery and inventory and then builds from there, adding on remote control and OS and app deployment, and policy and patch. So the tool can be licensed as a suite. For those that are using it today, you may have everything. You may have just a couple of components like inventory and remote, but important to note that there are 5 total modules. So if there's an area that you don't currently see or don't currently have access to, certainly you can reach out and we can talk to you about the capabilities of those modules and get you a license for those. Now, one of the first pieces I wanted to talk about is the overall architecture. With BMC Client Management, one of the advantages is the ability to be able to manage devices regardless of their location. Frequently have people that will be in the office one day and then the next day they disconnect. They're home on the couch, they're in a hotel lobby, they're in an airport terminal, but you still need to be able to, number one, communicate with them, be able to capture that hardware and software information on a reliable and regular basis, as well as be able to support them, whether that be through a remote control session or to be able to install software that's needed, patches that are required, things of that nature. So it's important to note for those that have not yet done so, Client Management offers the capability of what's called a relay, and that's nothing more than a device that serves as a collection point and a distribution point for those devices. These can be internal relays. You have multiple remote offices. You typically would want to put a relay point at each one of those remote sites so that if you are deploying patches, you are deploying software, or you're simply collecting inventory information, then everything's happening locally versus having to force everybody from those remote sites to come all the way back to the master server, and hopefully converting as much WAN traffic to LAN traffic as possible so that users are receiving those software applications, they're receiving those patches locally from that nearby relay point versus having to traverse the WAN and come all the way back to get those from a single point. So for the internal users, they can connect to that master or they can connect to one of the internal relays. If you want to be able to service those external customers, then what's required is to make sure that you designate an internet relay or a relay that's going to sit in a DMZ so that it has an IP address that those users can reach externally. That way, as long as they have the BMC Client Management agent installed and they have an active internet connection, then you have the capacity to be able to manage those devices as they roam around from office to out of office, from hotel lobby to airport and coffee shop and on, so that you don't lose connectivity to them for any point, and you always have up-to-date inventory no matter where they are. Now with that, let's dive in and talk about some of the configuration options and things that are frequently overlooked, but very important in terms of setting up and configuring client management. The first thing I'll mention is rely heavily or look to use the wizards and the instant expert as much as possible. One of the nice things about client management is it provides you with simple to use walkthrough wizards so that all the core tasks from setting up your initial inventory scan to deploying the agents to setting up your application deployments and OS imaging and things like that are all wrapped up in simple walkthrough wizards that you can see down here in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. This just saves you time and effort from having to navigate what can be long and lengthy menus, right? As we expand this Explore menu over a navigator bar on the left-hand side, there's a lot of different options and a lot of different areas to be able to dive into. And this can become cumbersome and until you've had time to familiarize yourself with the navigation and learn where those different pieces and parts are. The wizards do a great job of directing you through simple walkthrough pages so that when it comes time to set up a discovery of your network, for example, you can simply kick off a wizard and walk through the pages step by step, and it saves you time from having to go through and learn all that navigation. The instant export piece, as you'll see, there's a little switch for this in the upper right-hand corner of this window, is a walkthrough for some of the initial setup components, as well as some more not typical day-to-day tasks like taking inventory and deploying packages, but configuring the tool so that it integrates into your environment. Things like connecting to Active Directory, for example, is something highly recommended. This way you've got a nice walkthrough. Again, it's going to take you through step by step. You'll see up here in the upper right-hand corner of the window. As I go through and follow the instructions and navigate, it's actually going to end up taking me through those menus and taking me through the options on that left-hand side without having to know where to go and where to navigate. Now, for an example like Active Directory, this is something that's recommended you do really as almost a step one immediately after installing the software, so that you can easily pull in all of your user and device and group information from your directory server and not have to recreate that specifically inside of client management. You can go in and create your own device groups and create users within client management, but it could be time consuming, especially if you have a large organization. And by being able to tap into the directory directly, and we can pull all of that information in on a scheduled basis, whether it's one LDAP server or multiple LDAP servers. As you can see in my case here, I've connected to 3 different directory servers so that I can get information enterprise-wide, and that way I'm not having to deal with managing user information and creating groups specifically within client management, but can leverage that information that's pulled from the directory. And you'll see as we go talk about different aspects from app deployment to OS deployment to patching, that those user groups and those device groups and devices are going to become critical, allow you to target those patches and target those applications at the right machines and the right group of devices and users when you want to. Now, another initial component, and again, there's instant experts who walk you through this, but something that's often overlooked is making sure that you probably immediately after you connect to Active Directory, connect to your mail server. And this is important because this email configuration will allow you to actually get emailed alerts. You can see there's an alert section here within the same preferences window, so that if I want to get alerted to different conditions in the environment, maybe I've got new devices popping up on the network that don't have an agent on them, or we've lost communication with the device for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, or if you're tracking software licensing, you want to be alerted to the fact that your application licensing has been exceeded. Those types of things require that active connection to your email server so that you can designate those administrators that need to be notified in the case where one of those events occurs. Now, you'll always be able to see these directly within the console, right back from your home page. So you'll see up here, and this is where a lot of administrators will view these, but it's much nicer and much easier to take these alerts, whether it be related to software or some compliance violation or user's disk drive space is running low, that you're able to get an automated email alert as opposed to having to log into the console and repeatedly scan through this list to find out what those alerts are. So tapping into Active Directory and tying into your mail server is one of the first 2 main steps to go through and deploying this, so that you're able to get all of those automated notifications easily. Now, for those that are looking to use client management with your service desk tool, whether that be one of the BMC service desk tools like Remedy Force, Footprints, or whether that be another third-party external service desk application, you also have the ability to create those interfaces or integrations through client management using a RESTful API, if you're talking about a third party, and if you're dealing with one of the BMC service desks, of course, they've made it a lot easier and provided a simple configuration screen to allow you to connect to those very quickly without having to use that RESTful API developed, so that not only can you get email alerts when those events are occurring, but those can then actually generate service desk tickets. You want an incident, it gets assigned to somebody to let you know that your software licensing is running low for Microsoft Office, or you want to know when somebody turns off their firewall and violates a compliance policy. Those types of things can, again, be everywhere from simple alerts that you view here in the console to email alerts that go out to all those administrators that need to respond, all the way to using the APIs and the interfaces to the service desk to be able to create tickets and actually assign that work to somebody to follow up on a particular issue. Now, another component is when you're initially deploying BMC Client Management, one of the first things you have to do is you're going to have to generate a list of all the devices that are out there on your network. So Client Management does it in two different ways. First is an agentless scan of your network that generates this discovered device list that you see here. So you'll go through and point this at different parts of your network, subnet at a time, or different pieces of the network, and you'll set that up on a schedule so that as new devices are getting plugged in, that you're able to immediately detect those, whether it's a switch, a router, or desktop, laptop, server, on and on, so that you're able to make decisions. Number one is which devices you want to manage by deploying an agent, in which case, Client Management provides agents for Windows, Linux, and Macs. But of course, you'll have a bunch of other devices you're going to find within here, like IP phones and network printers and those switches and routers that I mentioned. So this agentless scan is crucial so that you can have a sum total, a master list, if you will, of all the devices that are out there on your network, and then can decide whether, number one, you either set it up to automatically deploy those agents as those new devices appear, or to be able to use this list that gets generated from this agentless scan so that you can go through and select all of those devices that you do want to manage. And you can access the agent rollout wizard through a little pop-up context menu here. Or again, you can go back to that home page and you'll see an agent rollout wizard back on that home page in that little box, so that you can go through and select those devices that you want to put an agent on. Now, the application is licensed based on how many agents you deploy, not based on what you discover. So you may end up with 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 devices in this agentless discovery list. But the licensing is based on how many devices you're going to manage. And certainly, of course, for those devices that don't have agents, like your network printers and switches and routers, that way you've got details and information about those devices, but don't have to worry about licensing, 10,000 or 20,000 devices just simply because you discovered it. Now, another key component of not only running discovery and having all this information available within Client Management, but to be able to integrate again back to your service desk tool of choice, is to be able to take all of this information and populate it into your CMDB in the service desk, so that as you're going about logging incidents, you're submitting changes, you're dealing with problems in the environment, that you're able to access all of this discovered information related to the workstations and network devices, and be able to bring up that list and link that desktop machine that's having a problem to that incident, or the server that you're getting ready to update or make a change to, so that you're not having to manually populate those assets into the CMDB, but can simply rely on this agentless sweep, as well as the agent-based inventory, to do that population for you and not have to key in things like asset tags and serial numbers and host names and IP addresses, on and on. Now, once you've deployed agents to your devices and can actively manage them, they'll appear in this topology view where you'll be able to see everything that's out there and communicating via those agents. And if you have chosen to deploy relay points throughout your network, then those relay points will be visible as well, so that you can see where those remote sites and remote offices are and which devices are located at those sites. So again, that way, if I'm getting ready to deploy software or deploy patches to those machines, then I don't have to do everything from a single point and that master server, but can easily push that group of patches or that application once out to that relay point and allow the relay to then distribute it out to all the machines that are connected to it. Now, in terms of deploying the agent, another thing that's important to note is you have the ability to configure exactly what components of client management you want in that agent. So you'll notice back here on the home page, there's a license graph that'll show me how many OS and app deployment licenses I've used, how many patch management licenses have I used, how many compliance licenses have I used. And you'll notice that those numbers can vary, drastically from one to the next. Perfect example is, servers versus desktops. If you're not, you may, want to have the capability to remotely support or remote into a desktop, but may not need remote control capability on a server or, a specific group of devices. So it's important to note that when you're deploying those agents, if you don't need and you don't see yourself, using OS and app deployment on a server, for example, then simply remove that from the agent, save that license, and now you have an OS and app deployment license that can be used on another device, versus simply, pushing out an agent that has everything installed into it, in which case you might not be using certain aspects, but you're still going to be consuming a license. So that way, even though that you may have pushed out 500 agents, and if you only need remote control capability on 250 of those devices, you've still got 250 agents you can push out that will provide remote control to another group of machines. Now, it's also important to note that in the topology, this is where you can actively work with the devices that you're managing, whether that be simply wanting to take remote control, in which case I can access the context menu and launch into a remote session with that device. Or there's also a web console that's available for users so that they can simply access this via a browser and a URL versus having to log in and have credentials set up for me here in the console. So you can actively go in and open up a web console like you see here that would allow a user, maybe somebody on the service desk, to go in and be able to pull up a list of devices that they want to remote control into, and can simply take remote control via the web console as opposed to logging into the administrative portal. And that's advantageous in that not everybody needs to be able to set up software packages to deploy, and they don't need access to patch management, and you don't want them digging around in inventory, but they need to have a remote control capability. So the web console gives you a dedicated console or interface for those users who simply need to provide remote support, but they don't need to be in that administrative console where you have to deal with a set of credentials and manage their permissions and capabilities, but can simply roll this out to them so that they can easily launch in a remote control session through the browser. This can be done, of course, through your service desk application, so Remedy Force, Footprints, Remedy, on and on, and give them multiple options in terms of how they can connect to a remote device. Now, it's also important to note that that same menu that provides you with remote control access, this is fully configurable. So if you look on your global settings, one area you'll have is this device menu under your system variables. And this is where you can build more functionality or add capability to that context menu so that if I have other support sites that I rely on, or I want to create a link directly back to the server documentation, or the administrative guide for that desktop or laptop, and I can easily go in and create everything from a simple link to a web page all the way to being able to run local executables. So I want to open a command prompt on the machine, or I want to ping it and see if it responds to a ping request. So I have options that I can go in and create, so that if I wanted to launch into a particular site, maybe if I'm Dell, for example, if I've got Dell machines, I might want to create links for those devices, so that as I'm looking at a particular server or a device in that topology, if I've created a menu for it, then as I come in and I access that context menu, it's going to give me the ability to execute that command prompt, or ping that device, or go to that website that's going to pull up that administrative guide or that user manual and provide some detailed information on that specific machine that I may need or want. So one way you can go through and easily configure the tool to provide functionality that's not out of the box, but that can be very helpful in terms of being able to provide support, is being able to go in and add those links to those different sites, to those different applications that you're going to use to support those devices outside of client management, so that anywhere you are within this topology view, you can simply click on that device, access that context menu, and run that application or access that website very easily. Now, there's also what they call direct access tools, which if you're dealing with remote users or devices that maybe you're supporting them over the internet, or they've got a slow connection, maybe onto a remote site. The direct access tools give you the capability to still support that user remotely, whether you need to transfer, copy a file over to their desktop, you need to stop or start a service, or you want to edit the user's registry and make a change to the device. And the direct access tools give you the capability to go directly into the registry, bypass the whole screen sharing, so that you're not eating up all your bandwidth just simply passing screen refresh data back and forth, but still have the ability to go in and be able to add and edit keys and make changes to the user's device without having to open up that screen session. So the direct access tools are nice in that they're still going to give you the ability to go in and make changes and updates and stop and start services and processes and things like that, but get in and out quickly, bypass the screen sharing session, and simply do what you need to do directly through the back end of that device. Now, in terms of the inventory, I mentioned the agent list discovery that generates the master list. Once you deploy the agent to the device and provide it with credentials, of course, it's going to then begin to take inventory on a scheduled basis. And you'll still always want to have that agent list discovery running, typically on a daily basis, so that, again, as new devices are popping up on the network that don't have the agent installed, whether it's a new corporate machine that gets deployed, or whether somebody brings a laptop in from home and plugs it into the port in their cubicle, that immediately that those new devices are out there, and can then either automatically deploy that agent or selectively choose to deploy that agent to that device, so that you can make sure that it's secure and it gets the patches that it needs to have while it's on your network, and you can remotely support it if needed. So you always want that agentless suite to continue running on a regular basis, so that you're constantly finding out about things that you might not be aware of if you haven't deployed that agent onto them. Now, with that inventory information that's captured, the agent, as well as the agentless scan, are going to be able to provide you detailed hardware and software configuration information, BIOS and hard drive and memory and operating system configuration, installed software and licensing information. So what applications are they running and what versions of those applications and where are they located. Security information will pull out anything related to your antivirus, anti-malware software, map drives, shared resource drives, so that you know what they're running. Is their firewall turned on or off, things like that in terms of configuration. And then the compliance tab uses the compliance management module to allow you to create hardware and software policies that can be applied to the devices, so that as you're taking inventory, and if the inventory does not look or is not configured according to those policies, you have an easy way to be able to see what's out of compliance and what's within compliance based on those policies you create. So I know, just by simply scanning a single page here, whether that firewall's turned on or off, or whether they have their anti-malware or antivirus software updated recently, versus having to simply go in otherwise. And, I'm going to have to dig through to find that data here manually, dig out that McAfee antivirus or Symantec or whatever it may be, look at the version, and then trying to remember if that's the latest version or the version I want them to have or not. The compliance module gives you an overlay to your inventory so that it can more or less highlight and pull out all of the important information that's in that hardware and software config, and easily allow you to see where you have somebody that's non-compliant or doesn't have their machine configured the way that they should. Now, another important piece and component of client management that's part of the standard, say, core functionality. It's not one of those licensed modules, but just part of the basic application, is what we call operational rules. Operational rules are your way of being able to automate and create fixes for all types of scenarios and situations, whether it be installing software, whether it be uninstalling software, installing patches, restoring desktop shortcuts, remapping home drives, you name it. Whatever those common issues that your customers are calling you about or frequently reporting, I can go in and I can create what's called an operational rule to correct those different situations and be able to push that out to the device. So if I need to restore a user's access to a shared drive that they mistakenly deleted or simply not appearing the way it's supposed to, then I can go in and create these rules. And again, this is where the connection and interface back to your Active Directory comes into play. And so that when I want to go in and restore, that shared drive access for a particular user, then I can go in and I can add those users, having pulled all of that information from Active Directory. I've got all my user accounts here. So if Mike calls up, contacts the service desk, or calls me direct and says, hey, I don't see my shared drive, I can easily go in and assign that operational rule to Mike so that he immediately gets his shared drive access back. Or if I'm going to be doing something, to a large group of devices, I want to make a change to, kind of wholesale, whether it be everybody in the environment or enterprise or some subset, then I can go in and browse that same kind of directory information that we're synchronizing so that I can leverage all of the containers and groups and OUs that are in the directory and say, hey, I want to set up this shared drive for everybody in finance and marketing, and be able to leverage the directory to be able to identify which devices and which machines are in those containers, versus having to go in and specify those manually, or have to create those devices myself. And then I can simply select on those and be able to track the progress and deployment of that particular rule. Now, the rules themselves are designed to keep you up from having to script. So if you're doing any kind of, PowerShell, any scripting along those lines, the operational rules are designed to help keep you from having to get into that. And the way it does that is it provides you with a list of commands, and we'll come back to this little drop down here in just a moment, so that instead of having to write those scripts and create those commands, you can go in and do, your file handling. You can do your drive mapping. You can edit the registry and make all those changes that are necessary, but not have to worry about writing the scripts or knowing how to. So you'll see in the library here of these commands, this is where I can come in and set up my command to delete a file or, copy a file over to that user's device. So all your file and directory handling to be able to manage, the processes and services. Is something running? I can check it. If it's not, start it. If I don't want it running, check it, stop it. Create things like a blacklist and a whitelist. So processes that maybe I don't want them running. Facebook, I can just monitor that device for that Facebook process to kick off and immediately deny it if they try and execute it. So you'll see there's a long list of these commands, being able to go in and edit that registry, maybe turn off that start menu item or delete it, get rid of an icon in their system tray that I don't want them to see. And I can simply go in and put in all of the information, create a key, create a value, and then we, turn it on or off by setting that value, and use these commands to stack up and take multiple actions. I need to change a registry key. I need to delete a shortcut. I want to copy some files. Then maybe I want to reboot their machine. I can use this library of commands and stack those up, and then of course organize those or put those in a sequence, 1, 2, 3, so that whatever it is I need to do, I can then create, an operational rule for that, which is going to serve as my script, and then I can go in and use my Active Directory groups and users to execute that series of steps on whatever group of devices I want. So an example of talking about compliance, if I've got a compliance rule like this one here, where I'm simply checking to see if somebody's got their firewall installed and turned on. Done much the same way. There's a simple one-step compliance policy, and it simply checks that machine to see is the firewall installed and enabled. And then based on your inventory, when it runs, it's going to come back and say, here are the results based on the latest inventory. You've got 12% of the environment is compliant, and you've got almost 63% that don't have it installed or don't have it turned on, one of the two. So you can look at that compliance device by device, or I can look at it enterprise-wide looking here. And I can also then go in and say, just show me everybody that's non-compliant. And I know exactly which devices in my inventory don't have that firewall turned on or installed, so that I know which machines need to be fixed and what needs to be corrected on them to get them back into compliance quickly. Now, if I wanted to take this firewall compliance policy, then I also have the ability to create a group of those users and simply say, create a group of those devices that aren't compliant, so that when I go in and I want to create that operational rule to fix those users, and maybe just call it simply enable firewall, then I go in and I create that rule. I dive down into it. I access that library we just looked at. And I go right down here to the bottom and look at the firewall. And here's where I can go in and change the status of that firewall on those devices. And I'll simply say I want it to be active in this case. I want to turn it on. And I just add that as my one-step operational rule. Go in and enable the firewall. Now, when it comes time to executing that firewall command on the right group of devices, when I go to my device groups now, and I say I want to assign a device group, I can quickly go in and target that group of devices that don't have their firewall turned on, because compliance has indicated that they're non-compliant, and know that it's immediately going to go out and start hitting each of those devices that didn't have that firewall enabled, and it's going to start executing that command on each one. And I can sit here and watch and monitor as each one gets their firewall enabled. So hopefully the next time I go back to that compliance dashboard or look at that compliance interface, it's going to show me that I'm 100% compliant. Everybody's got their firewall turned on because I've executed these commands on everybody to enable it. So it's a very simple and easy way to be able to highlight and pinpoint problems in hardware and software configuration, and then be able to take your operational rules and be able to effect quick fixes for those compliance issues, so that immediately everybody's back into compliance as you watch those turn on. If you're again integrating into the service desk, Footprints, Remedy Force, then you also have the option when you create these operational rules to be able to make them available directly within the service desk. And that's just simple drop down here. So I either create this enable firewall rule and I leave it as not available. Somebody's going to have to either log into this console or they're going to have to contact me, and I can go in and assign it or execute it on the machines I want. Or if I'm tired of having to deal with that 15, 20 times a day, then I can simply say make it available in the integrated tools so that my users in the service desk, whether they're in Footprints or Remedy Force, right there from that ticket, can execute this enable firewall rule. So they don't have to build it. They may not know how to do it, but I, as an administrator, can come in and build these rules to fix all those common issues like the desktop shortcuts and things like that, and essentially make those available directly within the service desk interface. So it's one less thing that has to get kicked back over to me, where I have to log into this console and assign it and do it, myself, but can simply make all those capabilities available to your users in the service desk, give them more capability to resolve more things, even if they don't have the knowledge or the skill set. I can go and build those things for them and test them out and make sure they work, throw them over the fence to the service desk interface, and now they're capable of doing that drive mapping or making that registry edit, even if they're brand new and don't necessarily have the skills to do so. So I know we've got just a couple of minutes. I want to make sure that we give some time for anybody that has any questions on anything we've talked about to this point, anything we haven't talked about. Please feel free to use the chat box to ask those questions, and we'll try and answer as many as we can.
Yeah, folks, so far I don't have any questions here from the audience. Folks, if you have a question, now's the time to enter it in the Q&A section of this WebEx. Any question that you may have about BCM, either a current instance of BCM that you may have, or you're interested in potentially seeing something in BCM, maybe your organization is leaning towards that tool or doing a search for IT asset management. So now's the time to go ahead and put your question in there. Great presentation, Kyle. You hit on a lot of pain points that I think our audience was looking for. So great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope so. As we do these, I try to do something a little different each time, so that even if you come back in a few months and we're doing another one, that I'll cover a completely different set of topics.
Yeah, this is great, and folks, this is a good opportunity to take advantage of Kyle. Kyle's well versed in this tool and can answer just about anything. And there have been a lot of changes to BCM more recently, and I know that they've even got a cloud version of this now instead of besides the on-prem that they released this year. Isn't that correct, Kyle?
Yes, there is a hosted version.
Yep.
So that if you don't want to have to deal with upgrades. You don't want to have to deploy a server and license an operating system, things like that, database. The hosted option may be a way to go.
Excellent, very good. And of course, Flycast Partners is more than happy to assist you with that and assist you with. We can actually even do your support for this particular tool. We offer support and remote administration services. So if your organization is having any difficulty with BMC's client management, we are the resident experts on this tool, and we'd be happy to help you. I don't see any questions in the Q&A section, Kyle. That's kind of unusual for this one.
Well, maybe I just answered them all. Hopefully.
It sounds like you did. Well, Kyle, thanks again for everything. And audience, I want to thank you for joining us for another Flycast Partners webinar. Tune in next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. We'll have another topic for you. If you do have questions or would like to see a personalized demo of BMC Client Management, reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. You can email us at info@flycastpartners.com, or you can once again, go to our chat window on our website and chat with one of our IT experts Monday through Friday during normal business hours. And until next Thursday, we'll see you then and have a great weekend.